I am 75 and familiar with the way a house breathes. Floorboards answer the weather. Hinges clear their throats before dawn. Drawers rasp like old violins when they move. For years, those small sounds kept me company. Then the hospital admitted me for the ordinary cruelties of age. And the soundtrack changed to beeps, carts, and the hush of curtained rooms. Before the ambulance ride, I had placed a small camera in my bedroom. A precaution for the fear of strangers and break-ins that pricks at the mind of any older woman who lives alone. I did not expect the stranger to have a key. I did not expect the intruder to know where I kept the envelope. Only my hands had counted. I did not expect the familiar shape moving in slow confidence to be the young woman who calls me mother. And I did not expect the quiet figure in the doorway to be the boy I once carried to bed after he fell asleep in front of the television. The first time I opened the app from the hospital bed, the feed bloomed in grayscale. The camera angle was kind, a witness that did not blink. My bed at home looked like a still life. A sweater folded on the chair, a thin line of sunlight on the dresser, the top drawer with its old brass pull. Then the room performed a trick I had not asked for. The door eased open. The frame, filled with a shoulder I recognized from holiday photographs. The hand moved with a practiced certainty. The kind muscle memory learns when it has repeated the journey more than once. The sweater shifted 2 inches. The drawer slid a few more. The envelope appeared. The one that held my slow years of careful saving. The cushion I built for winters I could not predict, and medicines no one warns you will cost so much. The envelope thinned while I watched. And the phone grew heavier in my palm until I set it down and stared at the hospital ceiling as if the answer might be written there. The next night, I opened the app again because knowledge is a stubborn habit. The red circle glowed in the corner like a lighthouse seen from far off. The room waited. And I waited with it. The door opened again. The same cadence. The same pause to listen for a silence that was not there. Because I was watching. The same hand reached. The same line of the wrist. The envelope yielded with the soft sigh paper makes when it loses weight. I counted breaths and seconds, and the sound of my own blood moving in my ears. I thought of the jar in the kitchen that had felt lighter for weeks. I thought of the grocery lists that had grown shorter. I thought of the way fatigue had crept into my days before the hospital and how I had blamed the weather. The errands. The simple math of getting old. A mind becomes sharp when it stops excusing what hurts it. I reminded myself that evidence does not shout. It accumulates. So I began to collect it the way I once collected recipes and report cards and crayon drawings signed in crooked letters. I wrote down timestamps in a notebook. I described the room each time. Not because anything changed, but because repetition proves a pattern better than anger ever could. I described the envelope. The softened corner. The faint coffee shadow that made it mine. I saved each clip twice. Once to the cloud, and once to a small device that looked like an old lipstick tube. I tested the saves by opening them from a different network. Because experience has taught me that panic ruins even the most careful plan. During the day, the hospital wrapped me in its routines. Blood pressure cuffs hugged and released. Nurses checked names and birthdays. Different hands brought trays with lids that never quite fit. I measured my strength like someone counting coins. I watched the corridor and the clock, waiting for the hour when the room at home would become busy. When it did, I watched without blinking. The daughter-in-law moved like a person alone in a store that had just closed. Efficient and unhurried. On one night, the doorway at home caught an extra shape. A taller shadow that leaned and folded its arms the way men do when they feel ownership of something, even before it belongs to them. That shadow did not touch the envelope. It did not need to. Orchestration rarely uses hands. It uses timing. At the hospital, the excuses arrived like scheduled weather. Messages told me about meetings that ran late and commutes that never shortened, and responsibilities stacked so high it became impossible to carry even a cup of water down the hall to a mother's bed. I did not collect those messages. I collected frames and seconds, and the thin line where the envelope used to be thicker. I collected the cadence of voices in my room when they thought the house was empty. I did not transcribe words, I recorded intent. Voices weighed options. Voices measured what they wanted against what I had. Voices treated my absence like a season and my savings like a harvest. The body keeps score. And mine had been writing numbers in the margins for months. Before the hospital visit, meals had begun to taste slightly wrong. A dullness at the edge of familiar flavors. Fatigue had lingered past reason. Headaches had bloomed and receded on days that did not justify them. I had chalked it up to age and stubborn sinuses and the ordinary wear of living. The camera told me a different story. Not a recipe. Not a formula. Simply an aim, a patient erosion of strength to lengthen my stay in places where they did not have to cook for me. Where my bills multiplied. Where I was more inconvenient than I had ever allowed myself to be at home. I reminded myself again that I am not a detective and not a judge. I am a woman who has lived long enough to respect process. So I made the process my ally. I wrote down the times I ate and the times I felt unwell. I wrote down the nights the camera caught movement and the mornings the hospital lab drew blood. I wrote the names of nurses who had known me for years and would recognize whether I seemed like myself. I wrote the date, I set the camera, and the date the room began to host visitors after midnight. Paper can hold more than money. It can hold a life steady when someone tries to tilt the table. The more I wrote, the calmer I became. Calm is a weapon older women seldom credit. Calm allows consistency. Consistency builds credibility. Credibility turns a house into a witness, and a witness into protection. I told myself the same sentence each morning as I watched the sun find the window frame at the hospital. No confrontation until the record is complete. No shouting when quiet builds stronger walls. No begging for kindness from people who have taught me their definition of the word. On the fourth night after admission, the camera at home recorded something heavier than fingers on paper. It recorded two bodies taking their ease on my bed as if it were a bench in a park. The phone filled with the sound of planning disguised as practicality. They did not list substances. They did not name amounts. They named outcomes. Prolonged frailty. A house emptied of its original owner. A future funded by what I had stacked away one bill at a time. A future in which I existed as a solved problem rather than a mother. I watched without flinching because the only way to make the truth clear is to let it stand without interruption. The day after that, I tested every file twice. I created a fresh folder labeled with a word that stabilized me protection. I moved copies there and left the originals where they were. I wrote a note for myself about next steps. I listed my doctor, who knew my baseline better than any textbook. I listed an attorney who had helped a neighbor when her brother tried something similar with a power of attorney and a fast-talking notary. I listed the local advocate for elder protection, whose flyer had once seemed like a document for someone else. I added two neighbors who knew the sound of my voice through a wall and the normal rhythm of my lights. I did not write the names of the people the camera had recorded. Their names live in my bones. Paper did not need them yet. Strength returned in quiet inches. The hospital counted progress in numbers. I counted it in the steadiness of my hand when I wrote. In the way my heart kept its beat when the app opened. In the absent desire to argue with a past I could not rewrite. When the discharge papers arrived, I signed my full name with the careful penmanship a childhood teacher had once praised. I did not tell anyone I was coming home. I did not give anyone the hour. I folded the hospital bracelet into a pocket and walked into air that smelled like rain and the inside of a wooden drawer. The house recognized me. The latch clicked like an old friend, clearing a seat at the table. Dust motes turned in the window light with the laziness of creatures who know they cannot be chased. I set my bag down and stood in the doorway of my own bedroom to memorize its shape before I touched anything. The sweater on the chair. The drawer. Half a shade more polished, where hands had brushed it too often this week. The place where my phone rests when I sleep. I did not cry. Tears have their place. But they also blur details. And I had made a covenant with clarity. I moved slowly through the afternoon. I made tea and let it cool and drank it anyway. I opened the app and scrolled through the index like a librarian searching her own stacks. I printed 3 stills and wrote notes beneath them in a firm hand. I copied the timeline into a clean notebook. Each entry, a single line. Each line, a single fact. I plugged the small device that looked like lipstick into a wall charger and watched the tiny light blink its agreement. I placed the envelope in a safe place that was not a drawer or a jar or a box. Safety often prefers the boring and the plain. Evening slipped across the floorboards and climbed the wall as it has done every day for years. I sat in the chair near the bed and thought about all the times I had waited in this room for good news from someone I loved. A grade. A job. A clean scan. The good news I wanted now would not feel good. It would feel like a roof that no longer leaked and a lock that turned. It would feel like rest. I set alarms on my phone for 2 minutes before the hours the camera had taught me to expect movement. I sent a brief message to the neighbor on either side that I was home and well and grateful. I set my doctor's card on the nightstand and the advocate's pamphlet beneath it. I wrote 1 sentence on a sticky note and placed it under my phone. Evidence first. Emotion later. Midnight found me reading a dull pamphlet about home safety as if it were a novel. 1 o'clock found me listening to the refrigerator hum and remembering that the house always sounds louder when you are waiting. 2 o'clock found me breathing on purpose. Slow and even. Teaching my heart that it could trust me. At 2:05 I lifted the phone. The red circle pulsed. The app showed me my room from 3 feet away. The screen brightened. 2:07 arrived like an appointment kept, the door eased. The room accepted a new shape that did not belong to it. The same sweater. The same drawer. The same envelope that had survived wars of economy and winter bills and the small emergencies of a long life. The hand reached. The pocket received. The shadow at the threshold lingered like a signature written in air. I counted to 10. Not because counting could stop anything, but because counting acknowledged that I was present for my own life. The clip ended. I saved it and saved it again. I added the line to the notebook. I turned off the app and placed the phone face down on the nightstand. The house returned to its old sounds. The night did not ask for my permission to move forward. I let it. In the morning, the list on my desk would become calls and appointments and forwarded files. The habit of being underestimated would end on paper. Not in a quarrel. The woman wearing the hospital bracelet would become the woman who anchors her own safety with a record no one can erase. I lay back and watched the ceiling register the soft rhythm of passing cars. In some story, this is the moment to break, to explode, to fall apart. In my story, the break had already happened weeks ago, in the quiet theft of breath and bills and peace. Tonight was not for breaking. Tonight was for becoming exact. I closed my eyes with the calm of a person who knows what happens next. Not because she craves it, but because she built it. Tomorrow the camera would keep watching. Tomorrow the notebook would keep filling. Tomorrow, the people I once loved would continue to teach me who they have chosen to be. Tomorrow I would choose, again, to believe my house when it speaks. I woke to a house that felt newly articulate, as if every surface had learned grammar overnight. Light moved across the floorboards like a ruler measuring what remained mine. I boiled water, poured it over tea leaves, and opened the notebook to the last line I had written before sleep. Evidence first. Emotion later. The sentence steadied my hand. The page invited more ink. I began by verifying the past. Every critical clip got 2 tests open. Play. Resave. I renamed nothing. I altered nothing. I noted the digital checksums in the margin, like a schoolgirl copying definitions she intends to remember for life. Redundancy is not fussiness. It is a promise to your future self that no one can steal your memory and sell you a cheaper version. Then the body, which had been a fog bank for months, needed clarity. The way a bruised knee needs ice, I built a simple ledger of intake and effect. Breakfast. Faint pressure behind the eyes. 10 minutes later. Lunch. Metallic aftertaste. 30 minutes later. Supper. Heaviness that lingers into bedtime. No theories. No accusations. Just the coordinates of discomfort. The hospital's labs gave me numbers. My own notes gave those numbers a map. By 9. I had combed my hair back, slid the capacity report from my doctor into a folder, and called the elder advocate, whose name had lived quietly on a flyer in my kitchen drawer for years. I spoke in scenes, not feelings. Admitted for age-related concerns. Camera installed before the ambulance. Savings removed during my stay. Late-night presence in my bedroom. Repeated pattern. I also named the suspicion that had traveled up from my stomach and taken a seat behind my eyes. Something added. Something subtle. A slow turning down of the dials that keep a person steady on her feet. The advocate did not rush me toward drama. She walked me toward process: where to file, whom to copy, what to request in writing. It is a relief to be handed a staircase when you have been standing at a cliff. The attorney's office smelled like paper that knows it matters. Smooth table. Silent pens. A lamp whose circle of light did not waste itself. I did not plead my case. I placed it, piece by piece, in order. Still frames with dates. Timestamps blocked into a week. A short statement of symptoms in plain language. The capacity report. My ID. Proof of the property being mine, and the room in the footage being my bedroom. A short outline of relationships that did not editorialize. The law is not a mother, it is a scale. I gave it weight to measure. The plan that came back to me was not cinematic. It was clean. Preserve the record. Formalize the medical baseline. Secure the finances. Reduce access points. Notify the appropriate channels with the minimum necessary information and let them ask for more. If you must capture further proof, do so without provocation, without confrontation, and without the kind of staging that turns truth into theater. The attorney underlined one line with a fingernail. I underlined it again in my head. Let them name themselves. I went home and attended to the ordinary parts of protection. Secondary locks on side doors. A door stopper for the bedroom that looks like a wedge of rubber and works like a line drawn in the sand. A small motion sensor that texts me. Not the world. I moved the last of the loose cash into accounts that send alerts. I did not hide anything to tempt anyone. I stopped leaving anything where I wouldn't leave it if my best friend were visiting. Then I made silence useful. I told no one I had been discharged. I left a lamp on a timer. I set the camera app to vibrate instead of sing. I walked to the mailbox with a letter to an old friend and a small USB drive in a padded envelope addressed to my attorney. A belt and suspenders gesture that helped me breathe. When I returned, the house had the restful look of a stage, waiting for actors who did not know the audience had changed. In the late afternoon, I did the work no one else can do for you. I wrote a one-page chronology without adjectives. The week before the hospital, the admission, the installation of the device, the first removal of cash, the subsequent removals, the recorded presence in my room, the references to travel, to spending, into my savings, as if they were an unclaimed wallet on a park bench. Then the turn whispers about prolonging my weakness, about how rest can be engineered to look like decline, about the convenience of a life that ends on time for other people's plans. I did not write methods. I did not guess at substances. I wrote the consequence: they sought an estate without an owner and a house without me. Evening settled on the mantel with the dust. I warmed soup I had made myself and ate slowly. Alert for the honest way food tastes when no one tampers with it. My body answered back with the ease of a room that has been aired out. I washed the bowl, dried it, set it down with the kind of care that has nothing to prove. Then I walked the perimeter of the house as a ritual. My father used to step around his garden at dusk, checking fences with his fingertips. I did the same with walls, latches, the window whose lock likes to loosen. No fear, just inventory. The phone vibrated at 2-3 inches, my pocket like a bird thudding softly against glass. The alert said what it always said. Motion detected. I did not run, I did not creep, I simply sat and watched my room from 6 feet away. The door learned how to open with less sound every night. The body in the frame moved with a rhythm. Familiarity teaches only to the comfortable, the entitled, or the careless. The top drawer opened to the place the envelope had once lived. A hand paused on wood, then retreated. Disappointment makes the spine roll forward a fraction. The camera saw it. The shadow in the doorway leaned. They had come to take again and found the well dry. They did not leave. That is how I learned what I needed to know. My bed hosted a meeting I had not called. The voices carried in the long vowels people use when they think the room is loyal to them. They did not rehearse guilt. They rehearsed calendars. They recited dreams with price tags. They floated a date like a birthday. They described an endpoint for me that needed no tools to name and no recipe to regret. An end nudged along. A story that would be told to friends as a sad inevitability. They conversed in my space about my exit as if it were a renovation timeline. The words did not have to be crisp to be clear. Intent does not need italics. I let the clip run to the edge and stop on its own. I saved it twice. I wrote exactly 6 words under the timestamp in the notebook. Purpose stated without prompting on camera. Then I closed the app and let the night unspool without my supervision. It is a discipline to refuse the addiction of watching harm in real time. It is also a kindness to your mind, which cannot live forever in a courtroom. In the morning, I forwarded the latest files to my attorney with the subject line the office had asked me to use. I sent the advocate a brief update. I did not climb onto a soapbox. I did not indulge the tidal wave that wanted to roll me backward into outrage. Clean cases are built on restraint. I arranged an appointment at the bank to shift my savings into forms that could not be accessed with a drawer pull and muscle memory. The teller did her job. I did mine. The account pinged my phone with a confirmation that felt like a small roof sliding into place. The attorney proposed an uncomplicated next step. Deliver the compiled package to the court and the appropriate officers. Do not wait for perfection. Do not predict behavior. Present what exists. Ask for the protection you need. The timeline. The stills. The audio. The capacity report. The symptom ledger. The proof of ownership. The list of times the house hosted scheming. I gathered them into a sequence that told a story without pretending to be a novel. Truth does not require a flourish. Only a path, on the way to file. I took the longer route through streets I had walked when my son was small and needed to burn energy before bed. Memory tried its old tricks, pulling me into images much kinder than the frame I had watched at 203. He once reached for my hand at a crosswalk and squeezed as if our fingers together made a stronger bridge. I let the memory visit, I let it leave. The man who leaned in my doorway while my savings shifted pockets is no longer the boy who shared my gloves on a cold morning. Stories break when we insist they stay too simple. The clerk at the window did not know the life behind my binder. She did not need to. She stamped, logged, and told me what happened next. The world makes a certain noise when your private nightmare becomes a public matter. It is not loud. It is not fast. It is real. I stepped outside and felt the air move differently across my face, as if it had decided to take me seriously. Back home, I did the smallest, kindest things I could think of. I watered the plants that had done their best without me. I wrote my neighbor a thank you card for always waving, even when I stared at the ground. I put on a sweater that smelled like laundry soap and sunlight instead of iodine. I looked at my bed and told it, without words, that it had been brave. Then I planned the last quiet step. The attorney wanted a complete confession if one would come. Not because the record needed it, by then it didn't, but because people who intend harm often narrate themselves into the trouble they deserve when they think the finish line is in sight. I did not need to bait anyone. I needed only to allow the room to keep doing what it had done all week, witness the way greed makes people speak their endings out loud. I left for a short walk at the hour the house had learned to expect visitors. I told no one. The lamp on the timer clicked on. The camera waited. My heartbeat found a pace I could sustain for an hour and a lifetime. The rest would be simple math. If they came, the record would be complete. If they did not, the record was already enough. Either way, the staircase was built. I had climbed it one measured step at a time. At the top was not triumph. It was a door with my name on it, and a lock that turned only for me. I slept that night with the confidence that comes from clean work. If the red circle glowed, I did not look. The morning would be soon enough, and the morning would belong to process. I set the binder on the chair, laid my coat across the rail, and let my eyes close on a room that had learned to defend me by telling the truth. The day began with the dignity of paperwork. Pages in order, tabs labeled, copies clipped. I ate a soft-boiled egg and a slice of toast that tasted like nothing but wheat and heat. My body welcomed the ordinariness with a gratitude that did not need words. The attorney had filed the package. The advocate had confirmed receipt. The bank had rearranged my money into shapes that required signatures, not drawers. I no longer lived in the wilderness between suspicion and proof. I lived on a map. I decided to give the house one more chance to speak fully. Not because I doubted it, because the people who had used my room as a planning table had a habit of narrating their ambitions when they thought no one would ask them to repeat themselves under oath. I did not want the theater of confrontation. I wanted the monotone of admission that comes when people are confident their audience is friendly. So I left the house on foot with a canvas bag and a grocery list that included nothing anyone would fight over. I walked the long way to the market and stopped to look at oranges stacked like planets. I touched the green of herbs I would later chop for myself and only myself. I bought milk in a glass bottle because sometimes the small pleasure of wait makes you remember your own. When I came back, the lamp on the timer was already on, and the house's silence had a readiness to it. The way a violin rests on a shoulder before the first note, the phone vibrated once. Then again. Motion. Motion again. I did not rush. I put the milk in the refrigerator. I washed my hands as if returning from a garden. I sat on the edge of the chair near the bedroom door and watched my bedroom on the screen from almost the same angle as the lens inside. There is a strange comfort in seeing the same room from two distances at once. It teaches you that truth does not change when you step closer. The door opened with the confidence of habit. The daughter-in-law crossed to the dresser as if retracing a route she could walk blindfolded. The top drawer slid out. Paused. Slid farther. No envelope now. No cushion to thin. The hand hovered, searching for something that existed last week, but not today. Behind her, the threshold collected my son's silhouette like dust. He leaned on the frame. He unfolded his arms. He folded them again. Ownership performs itself this way. It has no idea how it looks from the outside. They did not leave. They sat on my bed with the easy drape of people who believe they are the only ones entitled to fabric. Their voices had that Sunday afternoon quality that makes even cruelty sound like chores. They reviewed numbers that matched my ledger in inverse. They referred to the savings as if it were a public lake skimmed for personal thirst. Then they did something the law loves, they summarized. They spoke about my hospital stay as if it had been a convenient window. They spoke about the fatigue that had preceded it as if it were a design instead of an illness. A slope they had greased. A trajectory they had helped along. They did not list what went into bowls or cups. They did not name the means. They named the end state with a baldness that stripped the last softness from their silhouettes. They described a closing scene for me in which no questions would be asked. Only condolences offered and accounts opened. They placed their trip on a calendar. They placed their comfort on luggage scales. They placed my absence into a past tense that made the present tighten like a fist. The camera did not blink. The microphone did not moralize. The file simply grew longer by the minute. If there is a music to self-incrimination, it is a series of phrases that begin as fantasies and end as logistics. When they reached the part about the estate, my house as an asset to be freed, my possessions as clutter to be dealt with, my name as paperwork to be retired, the air in the room seemed to cool by 10 degrees. This is how a life is erased, not by enemies with flags, but by family with plans. I let the clip finish. I saved it twice. Then carried the phone to the kitchen and leaned against the counter. The world did not tilt. It settled. Grief is not a storm. It is a change in the arrangement of furniture inside your chest. I stood in that rearranged room until my legs told me to move. Then I moved. The attorney answered the update with the efficiency you want from people whose job is to escort truth into places where it can be used. The advocate added her own list, safety first. Locks engaged. Neighbors aware. Phone charged. Steps clear. The officers who had received the earlier packet were no longer reading, they were preparing. Process makes its own kind of weather. Paper summons shoe soles. Radios. And the calm of a badge that understands its boundary and its responsibility. We did not stage an ambush. We scheduled a visit. The time was chosen for daylight. For courtesy. And for the minimizing of harm. I sat at my kitchen table with the binder closed and a glass of water sweating onto a coaster. When the knock came, it sounded like any other knock. That is the strange mercy of good procedure. It refuses theater even when drama begs for a stage. They spoke to me first. They confirmed my identity and my wishes. They explained what would happen. And what would not. And how long things might take. They were not asking me to be brave. They were asking me to be clear. Then they crossed my threshold. My son and his wife were present. Having let themselves in through a door they had grown too familiar with. The officers did the work. The officers do names. Purposes. Explanations. Papers that say things out loud in letters no one can pretend not to hear. The attorney arrived like punctuation. Clarifying clauses that matter when sentences become binding. The advocate's presence made the room feel less like a contest and more like a correction. I stood as still as my house. I kept my gaze at eye level. Not to accuse. But to resist the old habit of shrinking, to make other people comfortable. I did not narrate. I did not add flourishes. The footage did not need a chorus. The timeline did not need adjectives. The capacity report did not need an epilogue. There is always a scramble at the edges when a narrative collapses. Rationalizations clatter like cutlery dropped into a sink. Outrage tries to pass for innocence. Shock pretends it is an alibi. The room absorbed it without comment. The officers did not sort feelings, they sorted facts. My name on the deed. My age on the report. My voice on the files, stating what I needed from the court to live the rest of my days without looking over my shoulder, inside my own home. Their voices telling my camera what they intended to do with my health and my resources. Collected at a decibel level, perfect for microphones and judges. Hands were not raised. No one shouted. A door opened. And people walked through it in an order that made sense. That is what justice often looks like when it is working a hallway. A line. A formality in motion. I signed nothing. I did not understand. I read what bore my name like a person who had waited her whole life to respect herself this openly. When the house emptied, it did not rush to fill itself with noise. It held the quiet like a clean sheet. The afternoon light moved in a long stripe across the carpet and then made room for blue. I put the milk on the table and poured myself a second glass. I ate an apple. I sat and did nothing for a full minute because my muscles needed to learn the shape of safety again. The days that followed were not triumphal. They were administrative. Protective orders issued. Access revoked. Keys collected. Accounts flagged. A calendar filled with dates that looked boring and felt like mercy. The attorney handled filings. The advocate kept checking that I slept. The doctor called to tell me my labs looked like a woman who had stopped apologizing to her body. My neighbor brought bread and refused to talk about anything except the birds who had built a nest above her porch light. People asked if I would forgive. Forgiveness is a word I do not recognize when it comes with the expectation that I also forget. I will not forget what my own bed sounded like under the weight of people charting a future that required my disappearance. I will not forget the discipline it took to sit with my anger until it turned into a plan. I will not forget that I am allowed to protect myself, even from people I once lifted into my arms without thinking of gravity. Months gathered like folded blankets. The case did what cases do when they have been built on steady hands. There were agreements and orders and consequences. Restitution is a cold word, it is also a useful one. Boundaries hardened into distances, measured in feet and calendars, measured in years. The house remembered how to belong to me. The camera remained. But it became a guardian instead of a guard. I focused it on the door that opens to the garden. Not the drawer that once invited trespass. One night, I woke at the old hour and checked my phone out of habit. The red circle did not glow. The room looked like a room. Not a proof. The bed looked like sleep. Not a bench. I put the phone down and listened to the refrigerator. The wind. The silence that did not hold its breath, waiting for harm. Peace. I realized, is not a feeling. It is a condition created by choices that respect your life. I am 75 and learning new definitions. Family is not a promise. It is a practice. Love is not a leash. It is a boundary with a welcome inside it and a lock outside it. Strength is not loud. It is exact. Justice is not revenge. It is restoration with teeth. And a house is not only shelter, it is a witness that will tell the truth if you let it. I watered the plants. I wrote 2 thank you notes. I stood in my bedroom doorway and acknowledged the courage of the furniture. Then I went to the kitchen and made breakfast like a woman who intends to be hungry for many more mornings. The camera can rest now. I will not forget what it taught me. Listen to the room you have built with your own labor. Believe it when it speaks. Believe yourself when you do.